The regular season is over, and to follow up my video for every team's midseason grades, let's grade every team based on their second half, every game after the All-Star break. This will be alphabetical based on team name, so if you want to skip to your favorite team, it shouldn't be hard to find. The Angels get an F. They were only one game under 500 in the first half. That was worth a C-. But there weren't many teams that lost more second half games than the Angels, and that was after they went all in at the trade deadline. The Astros get a B+. They performed the same as they did in the first half. 9 games over 500. I gave them a B mid-season, and the only reason I bumped them up to a B+ was because they did just enough to win the West. They weren't great, but they got it done. The A's get a D-. They won 25 before the break and 25 after the break, and they did it in 22 fewer games. 20 games under 500 is not anything to get excited about, but it's an improvement, so they're out of the F range. The Blue Jays get a C+. They were 9 games over 500 at the break, and they were 7 games over 500 in the second half. It was a pretty uninspired season, but they did just barely enough to make the playoffs. The Braves get an A. They were 31 games over 500 to start. That was an easy A+. They were only 15 games over 500 in the second half. Not quite as insane, but still great, and more than enough to secure the number 1 seed. The Brewers get an A. They were 7 games over 500 in the first half. That was good for a B, and they turned it on in the second half, playing 15 games over, running away with the Central in a 92-win season. The Cardinals get a D+. They were awful in the first half. Their season was over before it even got started. Their second half wasn't great, but wasn't terrible either. Only 6 games under 500, so maybe something to look forward to next year. The Cubs get a B+. I know, the last week was an absolute disaster, but at the break, they were 42-47. They played themselves back into the playoff race. They were 9 games over 500 in the second half, even despite losing 15 of the last 22. Their second half as a whole was very good, and they lose their A because they missed the playoffs. The Diamondbacks get a C-. Kind of the opposite of the Cubs. They played poorly in the second half but still made the playoffs. This was coming off a 52-39 first half. That got them an A, but playing 7 games under 500 and backing into a playoff spot, that's only worth a C-. The Dodgers get an A+. Nobody played better than the Dodgers in the second half. 25 games over 500, and that was after a pedestrian first half. They were good, 13 games over 500, but despite their pitching staff falling apart, they won a lot of games in the second half. The Giants get a D-. They surprised a lot of people in the first half, playing 8 games over 500, but the second half was a disaster. That wildcard race was wide open, but they played 12 games under 500 and they were barely on the fringe of that race. The Guardians get a D-. They were disappointing in the first half, 45-45, but this division was still up for grabs. They did nothing in the second half to take advantage. 10 games under 500, just a bad farewell season for Terry Francona. The Mariners get a B+. If you remember, this team wasn't even in the conversation for a good part of the year, and they played their way all the way to first place. Their story is very similar to the Cubs. Great second half, playing 13 games over 500, but they missed getting an A because when it mattered the most, they failed and missed the playoffs. The Marlins get a C-. If the Mariners are like the Cubs, the Marlins are like the Diamondbacks. They had a great first half, 14 games over 500, scoring an A, and they played 7 games under 500 in the second half. They used the capital they gained from the first half, won the games they needed to win at the end, and they scored a playoff spot. The Mets get a D+. They played the second half just like the first half, very underwhelming. They were 6 games under 500 to start, and finished 7 games under 500. Bad, but not terrible, and the Mets can just forget this season and start fresh next year. The Nationals get a B-. This was one of the worst teams in baseball, playing 18 games under 500 in the first half, but they showed a lot in the second half, finishing 35-37. This is the kind of finish that leads people to believe they may be a playoff contender next year. The Orioles get an A+. They played 19 games over 500 in the first half, and 21 games over 500 in the second half. They needed all those wins to fend off the Rays, and they did it. The Padres get a C-. Such a weird season, and this team will get their own video as soon as next week. They could never get anything going all season until the last 2 weeks. They finished the second half 6 games over 500, so that's not bad. But still, that roster should have done a lot better. The Phillies get a B+. They were pretty steady all season. No matter how well they played, they weren't going to catch the 104-win Braves. The best they could hope for was the number 1 wildcard seed, and they got that easily. They played 11 games over 500 in the second half. Not amazing, but good enough. The Pirates get a B-. This season was a roller coaster. An amazing start, an absolute crash. 8 games under 500 at the All-Star break, and they very quietly had a nice second half. They went 35-37, so still not a winning record, but definitely an improvement. The Rangers get a C-. They played great this whole season, 52-39 at the All-Star break and getting an A, then playing only 5 games over 500 after that. That was good enough to make the playoffs, but had they won just one more game, they would have won the West. They went from a first-round bye to a road wildcard series. That sucks. The Rays get a B+. They were one of the big stories in the first half, 23 games over 500, and they played 13 games over 500 in the second half. That's good, but their injuries caught up with them. They let the Orioles catch them, and they had to settle for the first wildcard seed. The Red Sox get a D. I think this team overperformed in the first half. I didn't like their roster, and they were 5 games over 500. They were even in the playoff hunt in the second half, but after Labor Day, they went 6-17. That's 11 games under 500, and that's how they finished their second half. The Reds get a C-. I gave them an A+ in the first half, surging to 9 games over 500, and that launched them into the playoff hunt until the last few days of the year. They would have easily taken a playoff spot had they had a better second half, but they were just 32-39. Pretty disappointing for a young team supposedly getting better. They're not supposed to peak mid-season. The Rockies get an F. They had a bad first half, 17 games under 500, and they were 21 games under in the second half. This is amazing. They were a full 12 games behind the rest of the National League, and this is the first time they ever lost 100 games. The Royals get a C-. This ties the worst season they ever had, but that was fueled by them being 39 games under 500 at the All-Star break. They were 30-41 in the second half, the same record the Red Sox had. Still not good, but a heck of a lot better, and makes you believe that rebuild may finally be coming to an end. The Tigers get a B+. This team won 39 games in the first half, and then won 39 games in the second half. They did this in 16 fewer games. They were 5 games over 500 after the All-Star break, almost scoring a 500 season. They fooled us before with a season like this in 2021, but I feel like I have to say it again. Watch out for the Tigers in 2024. The Twins get an A. They were a game under 500 at the All-Star break. A lot of people were mocking the AL Central, and rightfully so, but they had one of the better second halves in baseball, 13 games over 500. In a division where all the mediocre and bad teams were bunched up, they separated themselves and wound up with 87 wins. The White Sox get an F. In their long history, they've only had 2 seasons worse than this one. They started 38-54, 16 games under 500, and they ended 23-47, 24 games under, losing 101 games, and there's going to be major changes on the South Side. The Yankees get a D-. Nothing worked out for the Yankees this year. They're getting their own video also, but at the break, they were 7 games over 500. That's not good for them, but it's better than their second half. They played 5 games under 500, including a 9-game losing streak. That's their longest streak in like 100 years, and they had a battle to inch over 500 and finish with a winning season. Last time they didn't have a winning season was 1992. That's a wrap on my second half grades. Keep in mind, this isn't a grade for the whole season, just how they performed after the All-Star break. Let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please drop a like, and if you're new here and love baseball content, please give me a sub. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.